we have seen, especially since the pandemic, a massive growth in people seeking avalanche education, which is awesome. And I think one of the gold stars of this moment is that we have had such an exponential growth in backcountry users and travelers, but we haven't seen an exponential growth in fatalities every year.
Hello, everyone. What's going on? I'm Nils Minnick, and this is the Backcountry podcast, a show aimed at providing insight into the outdoor industry by interviewing people who operate within it. Today, I'm going to be chatting with Jayne Nolan, the executive director of the American Avalanche Association. Jayne, what up?
Hi, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm really happy to be here in this backcountry studio. It's way cooler than I expected.
I know, yeah. You're kind of like, you're psyched when you walked in. I was like, yeah, I guess it was kind of cool. We got the pink sign.
The pink sign is giving out a nice vibe. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I'm just very impressed. The half-eaten burrito back here, I don't know if people can see that, but that's a nice touch.
It's not real. I think a lot of people, yeah.
What? You guys stop. I literally was like, does he want to finish this burrito before we go? Like, we don't have to rush.
That's a prop. That's how good the prop designers are.
Wow.
Yeah. They did a great job. I wish I could take credit for that, but I can't.
Like a enamel burrito.
Something like that. It's like what you would have in in elementary school, and there's like fake fruit you can play with that's covered in germs. Cool. It's kind of like that.
Is the Cholula real though?
I think the Cholula is real.
Okay, thank God.
You can find out.
I'll pass. Maybe next time.
Okay. First off, executive director of American Avalanche Association. That's kind of that's a pretty built out title. It's rather robust at a 36,000 foot level.
Yes.
Could you give us a quick overview of what is the American Avalanche Association?
The Avalanche Association essentially is the governing body for avalanche professionals in the U.S. So we set standards for education. So if you take a level 1 or a level 2 course on the rec side, you are likely taking a course from a recognized provider. So they are meeting our criteria for instructor qualifications and for curriculum requirements. And then on the professional side, so say you're like an aspiring ski patroller or a forecaster, if you're taking a professional level 1 or professional level 2 course, you're taking it from an approved A3 provider. We should say A3 is the acronym that we go by. So you don't say American Avalanche Association.
We'll use that moving forward. Yeah. I'm glad to give that shout out.
So we oversee kind of the standards and best practices for education in the U.S. And then we also kind of distribute new and relevant research and information that professionals might need to know. So we publish the Avalanche Review, which is kind of the trade and scientific journal for the industry. And then we also cultivate community. So I think anything we can do to increase professionalism within the industry and build connection within the industry, it makes avalanche workers better people and better able to do their jobs. And so that's kind of our ultimate goal, is safety and community.
Awesome. Wow. Spreading knowledge.
Yeah, totally.
Through accredited purpose.
I think just industry best practice is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And that filters down to even your general rec user that's going skiing on a Saturday.
Yeah, totally. No, that's really interesting because and I'm sure you're fully absorbed in this, but it's every industry kind of has their industry standard. You know, I'm sure in the, I don't know, submarines, car engines, bridges,
planes,
airplanes.
Speaking of bridges, weird week for bridges.
Big week for bridges.
Big week for bridges.
Last year was a bad year for submarines, you know?
Exactly.
And there's these conversations that I think air around, okay, how there's this collective thing that's going on, whether it's people being taken out in the backcountry or operating in the backcountry. And it's big picture, kind of an obscure thing. You're trying to capture lightning in a bottle in a way, as far as maybe creating borders and boundaries of how do you get everyone on the same page and how to operate. And I'm curious, even, I guess we can get more into this with A3, but on the surface, I'm kind of curious if from the global level, how isotropic does it feel on your end, and what's maybe the process of seeing that A3 is kind of in agreement with what they're doing in Europe and what's happening in Canada, and
totally.
Can we help out, ski patrollers in Kazakhstan?
Yes, this goes out to all the ski patrollers in Kazakhstan. There is huge collaboration, I think, within the U.S. industry. One of the coolest parts of the avalanche industry is just this sharing of data and knowledge that goes from operation to operation, generation to generation. And that is also, I think, it builds on and is tied into this international community. And really our closest kind of international partner is Canada, obviously. And we have a really good relationship with the Canadian Avalanche Association, but also our members are so tied together as well. So like there's a lot of members who work across, the border and are doing work in both countries. And it just makes sense that it's aligned, because if they're two kind of separate tracks, it's just weird. There are people that guide in Canada that also might guide in Alaska or that come down to the lower 48. So there is great collaboration, and I think every couple of years there's an international snow science workshop that really feeds that growth and that industry connection. And so the Austrian Avalanche Association is there, and their members are there, and the Canadians are there, and we're there, and the Swiss, of course, are there, killing it per usual. So yeah, there's really good collaboration, and it's cool to be a part of.
That's really rad. And this we could kind of segue maybe into a little bit of your background with this as well. But I think on my side, the last couple of years, I've been trying to put my best foot forward with sort of preseason education, as we were talking about. I'm a professional backcountry snowboarder, and I spend a lot of time in the backcountry, and kind of being prepared and maybe having protocols and ways that you can approach your days in the backcountry. The course I take is structured around risk maturity. That's what the course is called, because it's kind of this whole encompassing thing, right? Of, okay, if I want to go out and work in the mountains, avalanches are a factor, the terrain's a factor, the people I work with are a factor. And what's been really cool to see is that, at least I think it's cool, is things are always kind of changing or evolving in a way. And there's not maybe different than knowing the strength of an I-beam, and as an engineer you work around that strength property to build your bridges for 100 years, right? But what's been really cool to kind of see, even in my small kind of experience with backcountry travel, is that it's always changing and it's always evolving. And I think it really leans into the scientific process, and it also kind of leans into in my mind, it's a very ideal human process in a way, because there's so much collaboration that's taking place. And initially, I guess my question is, how has it been operating in that space? Because it seems like you've, for a long time, have kind of had this science background and maybe a scientific outlook on the environment. That's
a great question. And I think it's the cool thing about the avalanche industry, and I think it happens on the pro side and also happens on the for a recreational user as well. There is this element of real world. You get to be out, you get to be seeing and feeling the snowpack and learning from it every single time you do this activity, whether you're going out as a ski patroller or a forecaster, or whether you're going out as an individual backcountry traveler. And so I think it is very cool to see that real-time data building back. And one of the things that I think we've enjoyed kind of supporting at the Avalanche Association is our membership is always contributing to new research, new data, new ideas, and it's all coming from their on-the-ground work. And you don't have to have a PhD to be contributing. You can truly but you can be a ski patroller who's hey, this is kind of weird, and I'm going to think about this a little bit more. And actually, you know what? I'm going to do some tests this winter, and I'm going to submit a paper. And it is actual practitioners that I think drive the field forward. And so I don't know if I've answered your question, but it is something I'm really proud to be involved with. And I think the association, that's our goal, right, is to make this collective community where people can come together to feel like they can share those ideas. And it goes beyond state lines. It's not just the UAC and the Little Cottonwood Canyons teams that are talking about it. It's then they're communicating with Colorado and with the Wyoming folks and the Alaska people. And it's cool.
Yeah, no, you totally touched on it. And that's kind of what I wanted your perspective on, is sort of this communication and things like state lines, and how, okay, yeah, if you're working for a whatever, not authoritarian body, but
we are. That's for sure. I'm just kidding.
You're the
body.
Governing body. That's what I'm looking. That's what I'm looking for. And I think that's what's really cool, and also just makes me maybe proud to be a part of the outdoor state. And I'm sure is fulfilling for you too. Is that it's nothing is really set in stone, and the collaboration and communication and education that takes place in this field is so efficient, in my opinion, because
growing and
it's
changing.
always growing. Because like, yeah, you don't have to have gotten your Pro 3 and have the Avalanche equivalency of a PhD to be valued for your input.
Totally.
And I think there's probably plenty of other industries in the world that are held back in that way.
Like you can't show up to be part of it unless you have X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, exactly.
And here, that's not the case.
Yeah, even though your ideas are probably extremely valuable.
Yes.
And honestly, when it's, what's on the table is people's lives for the sake of enjoying their lives, So it's cool that there's so much value kind of put into the efficiency and the culture of it. To back things up a little bit, I was doing a little background research, and I saw that you are from a quaint little place.
Very quaint.
Called
quaint.
Pinedale, Wyoming.
Yes. Yep.
If you blink your eye driving through the town, you will have passed through it. I've spent a little bit of time there, and I gotta ask, how much have you eaten at China Gourmet?
Too much. Too many times. China Gourmet is, I would say, the best restaurant in Pinedale, to be honest.
Maybe Wyoming.
Let's go Wyoming. Yeah. It deserves a Michelin star. Let's be real. I adore Pinedale, Wyoming. I am very proud to be from there, and I also love China Gourmet. And it's funny because my husband literally makes it a point, if we are in town, we have to get China Gourmet or we can't go back.
Yeah.
And my mom knows it. And you'd think it's we're coming home, home cooking. And that is part of being home, which is great. But the other piece is we have to get China Gourmet.
Yeah.
And I just want to clarify that if anyone is driving through Pinedale this summer or spring and stops by and China Gourmet isn't great, don't come for me. Because every time I go, it's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. It's you're the problem.
Yeah, it's something wrong with your taste buds.
And how was that? Because I wouldn't say Pinedale is a large town.
I wouldn't say that at all, no.
And, do you feel like if I were to pass through a small Wyoming town, it maybe wouldn't be my first impression that someone like yourself would be a product of that town? And how was that, maybe just to kind of get a brief amount of context as to it seems like early curiosity and inspiration with environmental science and sort of taking those steps in college and for the remainder of your life, having grown up in what seems like a small Wyoming country town. I don't know, or maybe everyone there is super into science and
very sciencey. No, it's
the environment. Maybe I'm wrong.
That's a great question. You're not. That's a great question. So luckily for me, I think I can't speak to every small town in Wyoming, but I think Pinedale is really blessed in that it is kind of this perfect pairing of rural and agriculture community paired with the outdoor industry. We've got a little bit of development like oil and gas. So it's this kind of merging of places, whereas I think a lot of rural towns, maybe you just see one industry. And so fortunately for me, Pinedale had this kind of mix, this perfect amount. And obviously it's has more of some things than others. But in general, it was a great mix. And I think for me, I grew up with parents who had been involved in the ski industry in Utah, and they moved to Pinedale to, I think, seek out recreational opportunities and that kind of lifestyle. And so they were super influential in my upbringing and being kind of well-rounded in that space. So yes, I rode horses and was a barrel racer, but I also studied science and, had an open mind. And my mom made sure we got kind of exposed to more than just kind of what was right in front of us. And then I also was really fortunate to have awesome teachers, which I think is the cool thing about that small community is because it has so much to offer, I think recreationally, it draws in cool people. So your school system is generally filled with great teachers and people who want to be there and want to be part of this lifestyle. So that lends itself to hopefully producing people who go out into the world and are a little bit more interesting and ready to go and kind of well-rounded.
Curious.
Yeah.
I guess fast forwarding, you moved to the East Coast.
I did.
To go to school.
Your neck of the woods.
My neck of the woods, yeah. For those listening, I was born in New Jersey. Formative years in Vermont.
Important clarification. Yeah. He is New Jersey birth certificate. Yes, I went to school in Pennsylvania. I went to Penn State. And to be honest, it's funny. I think of it
That's
now.
like not to interrupt you. It's kind of a savage change.
It was
Pinedale.
okay. My high school class in Pinedale, I think had like 64 kids. If anyone from Pinedale is watching this, you can confirm that fact. But I'm pretty sure we had like 64. And my freshman class at Penn State had 12,000, which is insane. But to be honest, I think I wanted that. Like I wanted something different. And my mom is from New England, so I just kind of generally always thought I would go kind of experience that. And I can't say Pennsylvania is necessarily New England, but like it's pretty close.
Yeah.
And I just really think I was ready for something new. And to be honest, when you grow up in a small town, everyone knows you and knows your story, and they have this view of you. And I think I was really excited to go to a place where literally no one knew me.
A little more
like, I think there was
autonomy.
one other girl from Wyoming in the whole, like, 45,000 students.
That's
there was one
perfect.
other girl.
I honestly totally understand that. I grew up in a small-ish town in Vermont.
Which town?
Stowe.
Oh, have you ever heard of it?
Ever heard of it? And I moved in my freshman year, or I moved to Park City. And I was, at the time, really excited to try go to like a full-size high school because I had done like online school in Stowe. And then honestly, like my class at the school was 30 kids, 40 kids or something.
So you know.
And like, and these are kids I've known from
Forever.
kindergarten.
Like you've known them since they were 2.
Yeah. Like you've all known
Yeah.
each other from like your earliest memories,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. But then on the other hand, right, when you're a teenager, you kind of want that like autonomy to be like a little more separated, or at least I did. And it was ironic because I wasn't actually able to get into the public high school when I moved to Park City, and I ended up going
Wait,
to
what do you mean? How are you not able to get in? Isn't public school like you
It was
can
a
go here?
residency thing because I just moved as an independent. My
okay,
family
got
didn't
it.
move here.
Okay. Did you go to, where'd you go then?
I went to the winter sports
Okay,
school.
my brother went to the winter sports
no
school.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What year did you graduate?
2012.
Okay, he's older.
Okay, yeah.
He's an old person.
soul.
Just kidding. He's actually not really, but I think he graduated in 2007.
Anyways, yeah, it was kind of ironic because I went from a class size of 30 to a class size
10.
of like 20.
Yeah.
I was like, damn it.
Yeah, small school. I will say,
I can
so
understand that
cool.
feeling to like want to be a little more.
But you get like
Invisible.
one-on-one teacher, like you have like it's like you
Yeah.
can't get left behind because
Yeah.
someone is in the room like, excuse me, no doodling
Oh, yeah.
over here.
Oh,
like
yeah,
you've
totally.
got to, yeah.
Okay, well, let's bring
Okay.
it back then because you're on the East Coast for a bit, and then
Also, I just want to say I'm so glad you're a Pinedale, Wyoming fan. Just before we move on, really warms my heart.
it's a terrible place. Don't ever
don't
go there.
ever. It's terrible. It's the
You're gonna
worst.
want to go to Jackson or Lander.
Yeah,
Trust
head
me.
over to
there's
Jackson. Teton County knows what's up.
there's nothing to do in
Avoid
Pinedale.
Pinedale.
Yes, easy to drive around.
Unless you're trying to gourmet.
Yes, of course.
Which I do think, I know I said this before, but really, China Gourmet, if you're listening, the American Avalanche Association is looking for sponsors. So I think it could be a good fit.
Let's do a collab.
Collab.
Do a little collab. Yeah, let's raise some awareness
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Continue
for
on.
fried chicken and
Yeah.
safety.
Avalanche Lo Mein.
Avalanche lo mein. So, anyways, you kind of like, it seems, eventually find your way. We'll skip through a bit. You eventually
Okay.
find your way to A3, the
Sure do.
American Avalanche Association. What was that sort of like introduction and initial pipeline into A3? And then I guess how did you kind of know that was where your passion lied?
When you know, you know. I'm just kidding.
That easy.
Yeah, that easy. So after college, I moved to Colorado, and I was working in land conservation, and I had really, as you had mentioned, kind of had this science background, and I wanted to, I think, be really involved in some form of environmental science. But when I got there, they were like, yeah, there's no jobs and you need 5 years of experience. It's like the classic dilemma when you
Yeah.
graduate college and everyone's like, entry-level position, but you need 5 years or like 2 years. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, I can't, how am I going to get that?
Yeah.
So I was actually bumming it, working at a bike shop. That's not bumming it. Bike shops are so cool. I was working at a bike shop.
You're owning it.
Yeah, I was really working at a bike shop, having a great time. And I started working for this land trust, and the only position they had was fundraising and development and like more organizational and less science-y. And so I was like, well, fine, I'll like do this until I can do, the actual conservation and get in on the ground floor. So I started doing it, and to be honest, I just kind of fell in love with it and with building partnerships and meeting with people and making connections and like the organizational component of it rather than the necessarily science-y component. So when the A3 job for executive director became available, I have been aware of the Avalanche Association for my whole life because my dad had been a member and had been involved for a long time, and my brother was a professional avalanche worker. So I just knew about it. And when it came open, it was kind of the perfect fit, and it took this skill set that I had developed at the Land Trust of like partnerships and collaboration and organization, and it kind of took that to the next level in terms of like a leadership role, and you're building this kind of organization that already exists, and you're leading this team. And so that's kind of why it was a perfect fit. And for me, I wanted to be, I've always loved the ski industry because of my family ties to it. And it's just like this place that's home for me, and the people are so awesome. And so I've always wanted to get back into it, but like I'm not a designer. Like I don't know, like I'm not a
What's your lane?
A merchandiser. Yeah, like this. And so this is my lane. Like nonprofit is my lane, and like organizational management is my lane. And so here I am, and I'm super passionate about it. And I like seeing the impact that we're having on people. And I think the last 3 years have been awesome. We've been able to grow exponentially, do more for our members, do more, I think, that impacts the greater community, which is super cool. So yeah, I love it, and it's been a great fit.
Yeah, that's awesome. So have you been there 3 years, is that what you said?
3 years,
okay.
Yeah. This is my third, almost 4. This is my like completion of my
so
third
it's
year.
like 2021,
Mm-hmm.
Especially,
Post-COVID.
Post-COVID. No, I'm just trying to think like the growth rate of attendees, I think, in the backcountry is like a big conversation that anyone who travels in the backcountry or educates or whatever, the growth has been like
exponential,
especially since the pandemic. And I'm sure even before that, like, whatever, it's compounding year over year. But how have you been observing that, and what have maybe been some of like the pros to seeing that, and also maybe like the cons? And let's start there.
Yeah,
I kind of want to dive into that a little bit because you're probably very involved.
Yeah, there has been, I think, exponential growth, and I don't have specific numbers in front of me that I can cite, but we have seen, especially since the pandemic, a massive growth in people seeking avalanche education, which is awesome. And I think one of the gold stars of this moment is that we have had such an exponential growth in backcountry users and travelers, but we haven't seen an exponential growth in fatalities every year. So like it is working, right? Like, the courses that we're putting out, what we're promoting is resonating with people, which is super cool. I think it's slowed a bit. Like we definitely saw from an avalanche education perspective, we saw a slow in the last year. Talking to the providers that we work with, they're saying that their courses are a little bit less crowded, whereas for a while they couldn't offer enough courses. Like there weren't enough courses for the amount of people that wanted to be taught. Like it was hard. You had to like book your course, and like you might not get in, and it was really tricky post-COVID. Now it's slowing down a little bit, which is, I think, normal, and it's like leveling out, right? Which is super cool.
Yeah.
One of the, I don't know if it's a downside, I think it's a challenge, and it has been for us, was with this like groundswell of people interested in avalanche education. And like, right, we're not teaching courses. We're like the governing body. So we're seeing it, but it's kind of like secondhand. But there was this need for instructors, right? Like we suddenly need a lot more avalanche education instructors.
Got a textbook teacher shortage.
Totally, textbook teacher shortage.
Yeah.
God, we are just really on education, public education. It's great. But it was a shortage, and so then there's this push to get people through to be teachers. And I think for us, it's not necessarily an issue, but something we want to be aware of is making sure that the instructors that we're, putting through and that are teaching A3 recognized or approved courses meet the standards that they should and are qualified enough to teach a course. And so that's something that I think we are aware of is like, okay, what are these standards and how are we making sure they're being upheld, and like at the same time promoting growth. And like, I think there's just a delicate balance between the two of like growing and doing it responsibly so that it's not like Joe Schmo out there teaching an avalanche course that doesn't actually know anything.
You got Bill from Big Piney or something.
From Big Piney. It really soured you on Big Piney. Big Piney is also great. Another small Pinedale community. Wow.
And something I'm kind of curious about too within A3 that I believe this is maybe an arm of A3 or a new initiative is the Resilience Project. And believe there's some kind of relationship between Backcountry involved in that space as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Totally. So the Resilience Project was formed. It's been functioning for the last 2 years, but it kind of started obviously before that, as projects do. They take time. And actually, it was an idea by a current Bridger Teton Avalanche Center forecaster named Gabrielle Antonioli. So shouts to G if you're listening to this. And she basically came to the Avalanche Association and was like, hey, I know you guys know this, but there's a mental health problem in this industry. And it was something that I think the Avalanche Association was already kind of grappling with and trying to think about, well, like, we know this exists, but like, how can we be like part of the solution? And I think for those listening who are unfamiliar, like the big pieces for our members and for people who are involved in the avalanche industry, it's, seeing trauma and seeing, going on rescues, being part of that definitely impacts people. It's really long hours and likely a shortage of sleep during the season. And a lot of times it's making decisions that are like hugely consequential, whether that's just making a decision around like your, guiding group that day, or making a decision about opening, a ski run, or making a decision about opening a highway. Like those are like huge consequential things that people are navigating, and like that wears on your mental health. So I think have always known there was a need for support. And we don't have exact numbers on suicide rates or, depression within the industry, but I would guess that it's similar to like an agriculture community, in that like we have these stoic individuals who like there's a stigma around talking around mental health or like getting help if you need it. And like we don't acknowledge it. We just like toughen up and like get through and like, we just, that's our whole industry. Yeah. And I think it goes beyond the avalanche. I mean, it's the whole outdoor space, really.
Oh, I mean, and there's kind of two aspects to this as well that I've spent a bit of time discussing and learning about and talking about, and be cool to get your perspective is, on one hand, for historical context, the cultural norm in the outdoor industry and, especially the backcountry skiing and snowboarding industry is you're like fearless,
yes,
maybe, and you're tough, and you have to be tough and must be present to win, and all of these pretty traditional psychological values is maybe how you could categorize it. On my end, and I kind of mentioned that I had been spending some time taking this class in the preseason that another pro snowboarder puts together, and it's this risk maturity course. And
I love that name. That is such a great course name.
It's really good. I don't know. Are you familiar? Does John Buffrey ring a bell for you?
No.
So he is like the head avalanche something for Canada. I'm sorry, Buff, if you listen to this. His name's Buff. He has a crazy life story.
Wait, I think he was just on the Avalanche Hour.
Okay, maybe.
I'm pretty sure.
He's a character.
I think he was.
Like real character. He has a goatee.
I haven't listened to it, but it's like on my radar to listen. So
probably.
I'm pretty sure.
You should. He's like in our world, and I think maybe in the snow safety industry, he's been around for a long time, since like I think the 80s, when you're using scats like as your initial transceivers and stuff like that.
The hot dog.
And and he's like currently, and I think it's transitioned, but like does the avalanche mitigation for like the Canadian highway, like through Rogers Pass and everything.
That's legit. That's some legit work.
And then he's also maybe the most respected and sought after guide in the professional snowboarding space. And just has this wealth of knowledge. But anyways, he sort of spearheads part of this course with another pro snowboarder, and there's a huge mental health kind of conversation that's tied in. And it's cool because someone like Buff has been around kind of since the quote unquote beginning of our sport.
And when they really weren't talking about mental health. Like for sure not talking about it.
And like there's a lot of other people that kind of do presentations who have been around for 10, 20, 40 decades and have kind of shared their stories or stories of their friends and how effective shitty days in the mountains can be, for a simple way to put it. And I think, I saw that the Resilience Project came up when I was looking through all this stuff, and I was like, wow, yeah, that's totally an awesome direction to be going. Because even as like on a humanitarian scale, I think it's been a really big conversation that everyone's having.
Like a global body.
On a global body. It's become a really obvious conversation for everyone to sort of acknowledge. And I think it's awesome to not only see, A3 getting involved, but maybe I would imagine, I'm curious how like it's been received on your end is where I'm going with this.
So the Resilience Project, really quickly, there's like 4 components of it, which I think is helpful to then understanding who's involved. The first component is a free like online tools and resources page. And so anyone can go on and access that. And it's everything from like book recommendations, podcasts, like the stress continuum, like just anything that might be helpful. And I think it's a great way to like dip your toe into like learning more about mental health, or if like you're considering getting help, like start there. The second piece is a free directory of mental health providers, and specifically providers that are familiar with outdoor recreation, the outdoor space, and also in often cases like the avalanche industry. And this we cannot take credit for because the Climbers Grief Fund started this kind of initiative of like gathering mental health professionals who understood, because I think there's sometimes a weird component if you go to a professional who is not familiar with the industry and they're like, well, why would you do that? Like, why would you put yourself in that risk position? And so I think it's cool because we are self-selecting therapists who like you'll show up and they also might climb or ski or, you know, have feet in this world.
I think that's maybe one of like the larger hurdles. Cause I mean, myself, like I've worked with therapists in the past for life stuff, snowboard related stuff. Like everybody has at this point, right?
And they're like, what are you doing?
And like it is tough to find the right fit because, you know, I'll spend a full session or a few sessions just trying to like explain myself.
And then you're like, well, this isn't working. Great.
Like,
back to the grind.
God, it would just be really nice if you understood how good a pow turn felt. That would really expedite this process for us.
Totally. Okay, so these therapists, they know a pow turn. Just kidding, but they're great. And so I think that's the second piece. The third piece, we try to do an annual webinar around like mental health in the industry and, you know, bringing people in that are doing cool work or like that can help you maybe start to navigate your own process. And then the last piece is this grant program. And this is money that we provide specifically to avalanche professionals who are seeking personal, like mental health support, or training for teams to bring someone in, whether it's at the beginning of the season to talk about resilience and mental health, or after something bad has happened to say, hey, this trauma just happened, or this team is in a bad spot. Let's work together to get out of it. And so that's kind of where we've been partnering with Backcountry, because obviously the Avalanche Association is a nonprofit and we rely on partnership support. And so Backcountry has, like, without their support, we wouldn't have launched the program, right? And to be honest, the grant piece is so important for me because it's where I see the most impact. So I think in the last 2 years, we've had 15 grants for teams. And those are ski patrols, forecast centers, guide services. There was an education provider who had a fatality in a course, not an avalanche fatality, but like an instructor passed away. And that's traumatic for other instructor team members. And like, how do we process that? How do we navigate it? So that's been so cool to see. And I think it also then like radiates out because those people that go through that training are then more equipped to talk about it or to like destigmatize it to their groups and their teens and their families and their communities. So we have seen a huge like acceptance of the Resilience Project and people are excited about it. We went through all of our funding this year, which last year was our first year and we went through most of it, but we still had some at the end where we were like, okay, like anyone else need this? And this year people were like, yes, we want it. And it's been so cool to see. On an individual side, I think we've done 7 grants in the last 2 years. And those have all been for members who were dealing with a fatality. And so like whether it's a fatality of a friend who's just recreating in the backcountry or, a fatality of a fellow forecaster, there's been some deaths this season in our industry that have hit really close to home, and our ability to provide people funding to do that is to get mental health support is super cool.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's powerful work.
Yeah. And I should do also another plug because Snowbound Solutions, which is kind of like a IT guru for avalanche workers and for our forecast platforms, they also have been a huge supporter of the Resiliency Project as well. So thanks, Snowbound and Scott Havens, if you're listening.
Big shout out. And I even if you wouldn't mind expanding, and it'd be cool just to get like your personal perspective too, while we're kind of on this topic, is even like what I think is cool and what stood out to me is even the title and the word resilience, because with the conversation of global mental health. There's kind of this balancing act, and maybe even the interpretation by some individuals or players that like, okay, if you're struggling, let's try make things as comfortable as possible. Let's just make like the world as safe as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, let's just reduce
the stress.
Let's reduce all stress and all risk and make things as simple and isotropic as possible. It's maybe a simple way to put it. But what I think is really important, and this is something that I've struggled to communicate maybe to a quote unquote civilian, is like, you kind of just need the resilience in a way. You need to be tough.
The world is a tough place.
There's a lot of cool things you can do in life, and like, there's a lot of risks that you sort of need to take along the way, but the rewards that you are met with are just as powerful, and it kind of creates this compounding human experience is how I see it. And could you, I guess, just expand on the fact that resilience is maybe accepting the fact that like, this is hard. You are going to need to be tough, but maybe similar to your body, if you set up some infrastructure to be in good shape, if your mind is in good shape, then you can handle the shitty days and still value the good ones.
I think, we were really intentional around the language that we used in naming the Resilience Project. And I think Gabrielle was super intentional with that as well when she came to us with this idea. That is literally it, because we aren't going to make it easier for these avalanche professionals to make hard decisions that might be consequential, that impact people's lives. We know that there's going to be huge pressures on them. And so it is all about training people to be set up for success and to navigate those challenges when they come. And I think of the 15 grants that we've distributed, I don't know exactly, but I would guess that half of them are for training prior to something even going wrong. They're for training for someone to come in and say, hey, we're going to teach you this before this happens. We're going to teach you how to know as a team member when you're dipping into an orange or red zone on the stress continuum, how to navigate out of that. And we're going to teach your neighbor and your team, your route partner, how to identify when you might be doing that. And I think on that same vein is destigmatizing the entire conversation, right, around being able to have those conversations with your route partner.
I'm having a bad day, guys.
Yeah, and being able to verbalize that and not just being snapping at people or being off, but to say, hey, I'm having a bad day. I need to take a step back or whatever. So I'm excited because I do think we are promoting resilience and building resilience and acknowledging that we're not going to change the industry and the stresses that come with it. The other piece that I think is really cool that we haven't really done a ton of public talking about, but we just this year provided some funding from our resilience program or resilience project to fund some studies. One is at Alta, and they are basically working with patrollers to look at their stress and trauma responses throughout the season. So I don't know if all of the patrollers, but a handful of the patrollers are part of the study. It's being done by their snow safety director and a researcher from UCLA. And they're basically going to analyze the whole season and see how stress and trauma kind of compounds. So even if you're having a good day, if you have then an off day, how do you get, how does that impact your next couple of days and how do you get back? So I'm excited to see what that data will bring. And I think that will help drive next steps for our industry on how we're addressing this, because it will give us a more clear and a more data forward understanding of what's happening.
Cool.
And so, I'm really excited about that one, and I'll keep you guys posted on.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. So it's happening this winter, and then hopefully we'll have some results this spring, summer.
Totally, yeah, that'll be interesting to kind of get some perspective on. And it's been cool to touch on this initiative, and I guess I was just kind of curious, are there and we've sort of feel covered quite a few bases of A3, which is a lot.
Broad combo.
Yeah, broad conversation. Maybe specifically, are there any other kind of initiatives that you wanted to bring up and chat about that you've been psyched on?
I mean, I'm psyched on everything A3 is doing.
Yes, of course.
There are, I think, for this audience, because I know there's probably a lot of people listening to this that are rec users, I think two things that are very cool and that I have found value in as a recreational backcountry skier. We publish the Avalanche Review every winter, which is so cool. And it's all of these new ideas and discussions about topics and, different perspectives on anything industry related. And even though it sounds super technical, I do think there is so much to be gained from just reading it. Like, I would recommend you should get a subscription to it because it's so cool. And it just, like, there's human factor articles and it's super cool. So that would be something that I'm super excited about and would want to extend beyond just the professional community, because the professional community loves the Avalanche Review, but I think there's value in it to everyone. So if you go to our website, you can get a subscription to the Avalanche Review for like $35, and it's 4 issues every season. And the other one, the other project that I think we're doing that I think fits in this conversation is we publish a accident analysis book called The Snowy Torrents. And it basically takes 10-year increments and it's completed in 10-year increments. And the authors go through and analyze each accident and then look at themes throughout certain time periods and time frames. And it is hard reading because it is obviously all avalanche fatalities. But as a backcountry user, I think there's so much to be learned from looking at other people, and like you can find yourself in those stories and you find humanity in those stories. And I just think if we can learn from mistakes that other people have made, and like that makes it long-term, like more, it helps everyone. And so I would say if you are an avid backcountry user, looking at the Snowy Torrents, and again, it's on the A3 website. You can go, you can buy it on Amazon. It's not super expensive, and it's just a great learning tool. And as we talk about these accidents, obviously, like, the goal is no fatalities, right? Like Utah, I think, was it last season or the year before, they had 0 fatalities.
Oh yeah, I think
which is so cool. Yeah,
so
and
rad.
like that's awesome, and that comes from education and from learning, and that's another cool project that we're doing.
I think those are both really cool. I'm kind of curious as well, what's maybe your North Star or your dream outcome? What's your ideal trajectory with A3? Like, what would you love to see? Where is there areas that you feel excited to explore? And, because as we said, it's never-ending knowledge. It's a cyclical process of trial and error, and over time you create a good body of knowledge. But having someone so involved such as yourself, where would you like to see things kind of go for A3? And then maybe even just, let's start there, and then we'll go into Avalanche culture and education from there.
I think at A3, we recently did a team exercise where we're like, what is our why? Like, why do we exist? And I think the 2 pieces that came up for us were safety and community, like those 2 components. And so for us, as we look at like our long-term goals, they all flow into those 2 buckets, like safety via professional standards and best practices, and community via connection and support, and like creating this space for people. And I think in terms of specifically like the Resilience Project, where I see us moving is implementing a level of resilience training into professional avalanche training. So like when you're going through your Pro 1 or your Pro 2, there might be a component that also talks about the mental health piece, which I think would be so cool. And again, like levels the field in that like everyone has access to it, right? Like it's not only some operations or some people that are doing it. It's this broader community.
Yeah.
I mean, I think implementing the resilience piece to training would be awesome for folks. And I think we want to continue. One of the things I think down the road is like continuing to make sure that professional avalanche workers are equipped with the skills that they need, and promote both like continuing education and cross-pollination, which already happens so organically in the industry. But if there are ways that we can continue that, so like we've looked at, are there modules that A3 can, offer people and like teach that are more specific to, a sector within the industry? And that's something that I think we'll explore. And I think just formalizing it, like when I look, I think the outdoor industry in general, but the avalanche industry as well, we've been kind of Wild West, like self-policers for our history. And that's super cool. And it's an exciting time because I think now we're like growing into that, like more mature. Yeah. And we're like just formalizing everything in the systems, and that lifts everybody up and it makes everybody safer. And yeah, I'm just excited to keep that moving.
I totally agree. And I've actually even seen that, I guess, in the field on my end is maybe more of a checks and balances in a way. And if it looks like someone is riding side country without a pack and kind of out of their element, instead of just being like, oh, let's stay away from that guy, not necessarily confronting them, but just being like, hey, do you understand what you're like, where you're at right now? What you like, what you've decided to kind of put yourself into, and also like maybe the like responsibilities you're putting on other people in the area if something were to happen to you. Yeah. And there's just been a much more open conversation. And even in the last couple of years, the amount of people that I've, even just side country, like seeing people, the ratio of people wearing packs without packs, you know,
which is insane,
exponentially increased the last few years. And I'm like, I'm guilty of plenty of things too. I don't know. Like I didn't start running a first aid kit until like 2 years ago. Right.
Also insane, but here we are. Yes. Like it's so cool. It's all about like growing and it's cool. I do think also social media and just like the online component has been such a factor in that. Like the forecast centers are doing such good work to communicate with their audiences. And like, I think it's cool because in my job, I get to see each segment of like each kind of zone. So like, what are the Wyoming guys doing? And like, what are the Utah? Like, what's that vibe?
What's Craig Gordon got going on
what's Craig
today?
Gordon? I mean, he and his man bun are like rocking out somewhere. I think it's cool. And it's like this really cool cultural piece that is like so organic. You can't create it anywhere else. And so that's cool. I don't know if I've answered a question or just
no, you nailed it.
Tagged on.
You're nailed. Hey, conversational format.
Here we are.
Back and forth. So we've been talking a bunch about growing community involvement, conversations. Someone that is quote unquote feels like they're on the outside. How do they maybe take some first steps to be a part of this conversation and maybe a part of the avalanche safety and backcountry community?
I think first looking at your local avalanche centers is awesome. Like they will have great resources that are local. They'll have an avalanche awareness night. They may be offering a know before you go course or, come and meet your forecaster. And just, I think going and introducing yourself to that community or just observing, like that's a great way to kind of dip your toe in. Beyond that, each region usually offers a snow and avalanche workshop in the fall, and most of them are open to the public as well as to professionals. And that's a great way if you're like new to this space to, buy a ticket for, $30, come and you get a whole day of learning. And a lot of it might be over your head, but I think this like concept of like seeing the community, starting to understand the players and understand how it all fits is super helpful. And as someone who attends literally almost every snow and avalanche workshop every fall, like it'll just be great to be there. And like, you'll learn just from being in the audience.
I can totally attest to that. Like, especially the first few kind of educational courses I was taking, everything would go over my head, but it's sort of this, knowledge by osmosis.
I wanted to say that, but then I'm like,
I was like,
that's right.
osmosis or reverse osmosis?
No, it's osmosis.
Okay.
It's osmosis. It's just like
reverse osmosis would be like cleaning the water. We're doing osmosis.
But like learning and like I think the thing about that is like it's low risk, right? Like you can buy a ticket, you can show up. It's in an auditorium. Yeah. You don't have to get on stage. You don't have to be in a course where someone's going to say, so like, do you know how to use your beacon?
Yeah.
You can literally just show up and kind of sit and like pick up on what's going on in the industry and what people are talking about. And usually the organizers of each snow and avalanche workshop do a good job of like putting together presentations that run the gamut of expertise.
Yeah, totally.
So that would be my first advice to someone getting involved. And then I think also, I know this has been talked about so much, but like finding a mentor is huge, and that's hard, right? A lot of people don't have mentors in their network in terms of this, like a mentor for avalanche education or backcountry travel. So I recognize that that's like a privileged view, is to say, find a mentor. Yeah. But I will say that I have had great mentors. I work with 2 really rad avalanche professionals, and they work for A3, but they're guides and educators in their spare time. And I have glommed onto them. Like, I make them go skiing with me, and I make them, share their knowledge with me in a good way. Like, totally. It's very friendly. But like, I was very clear with them, like, hey, you know more than me. Like, let's go ski together. And can you look at what I'm doing and tell me when I'm totally messing it up.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. The mentorship aspect. And fortunately, I think that's built into the culture, which is great. And it's kind of always been this like unwritten rule. And again, yeah, it's a tricky conversation, right? Because on one hand, it's a point of privilege because the ratio of new users to experienced users has kind of gotten offset in the last couple of years. But I could also comment that, yeah, it is, if you can find someone, or if you can kind of go out of your way and get out of your shell, or know somebody to get out with, it's maybe the best way.
They don't need to be an expert. Like a mentor could be someone who's just been doing it a little bit longer than you and is like, hey, I'm going to show you how to put your skins on.
Totally.
Like,
yeah.
That could be it. You know, like it doesn't, you don't have to go ask Craig Gordon if he'll mentor you, you know, like it doesn't have to be.
Well, you could.
You could. Craig, if you're listening.
This has been awesome. I feel like we've covered a lot of things all A3. It's been cool to kind of get to know you and get your sort of input and perspective with A3 and maybe just like the outdoor industry as a whole, and sort of rounding full circle. I guess I just kind of wanted to open the floor on your end and see if there's anything else you wanted to share that's in the works that you're excited about.
I guess the one thing I would want to share before we totally close this sucker
you got your
down.
notebook over there.
Do.
Should
I check it? Let's check.
Let's go
see.
through it.
Oh
yeah.
God, let's see. Is there anything
She's a
in
scientist.
here?
I'm seeing a lot of words written down. Resilience projects 1 through 4.
I think we got it. I really
Fun
think we're
fact:
good.
great handwriting.
I do
by
have
Jayne,
great
by the way.
handwriting. That's one of my. I do pride myself
As
on that.
textbook scientist.
The one thing I think I would want people to know, and it's not like new or upcoming, but you know, our work, and specifically the work around the Resilience Project, doesn't happen without financial backing. Like, we can't provide grants to folks unless we have funding. So if you find yourself in a position that you want to support this work, you can visit AmericanAvalanche.org and make a donation to the Resilience Project, or just generally to A3. But the Resilience Project will be earmarked for resilience grants for teams and individuals. And so I would just ask that if you know people in the community who could benefit from it.
I mean, even like
make a donation.
Yeah, even like the kind of, I guess, subscription options and the tiers of
anything
subscription
supports
options
us.
for
like,
A3.
We're rocking on anything.
And you guys kind of provide a lot in return, which is rad too.
Totally.
Like, people get quite a bit out of it as far as education resources go.
Yeah, and I would also say if there's people listening to this that have family members or friends who are navigating some mental health right now, or like even if you think the Resilience Project might be a good fit for them too, like it's just our website. There's a resilience tab, and you can go there and like dip your toe in and, point them to our direction, I think. Because a lot of times people don't know about it. You know, the American Avalanche Association shockingly hasn't done a lot of PR, so.
Well, once we get that China Gourmet collab,
Honestly,
word's going to get out.
That is going to be the rocket fuel that we just... That's it.
Oh, man. Well, Jayne, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for catching up with us. And I was just curious if you wanted to share any thank yous on your end.
Thank you to Backcountry. I have said this, I think, multiple times in this interview, but we literally could not do what we do without partners. So I think in particular, Backcountry, thank you for stepping up for mental health for avalanche workers and for this industry. It's huge. It does not go unnoticed. I also want to thank Snowbound Solutions because they've also been a great partner, and they're Utah based as well, which I feel like is really fitting because we're in Park City. It's just like, go Utah today.
100%. Awesome. Well,
and thank you. It was really fun to meet you and talk to you.
Yeah, totally. Talk Pinedale.
See you at China Gourmet.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I would like to thank everyone who tuned in today. If you liked the show, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. And in the meantime, from the crew at Backcountry, we will see you out there.
Toodles.